In 1998, the U.S. military declared a pilot dead after a routine training flight. No wreckage. No body. The search ended in days. 10 years later, hikers found his aircraft hidden deep in a restricted forest, and evidence he survived the crash. If he was alive, why was no one sent to save him? In 1998, the U.S. military gave one family a clean, final answer. A routine training flight. A sudden loss of contact. A young male pilot declared dead without wreckage, without a body, without questions. They were told to grieve and move on. For 10 years that story held. Until a group of hikers wandered off-trail in a restricted U.S. forest and found something that should not have existed. An aircraft hidden by time, corrosion, and deliberate neglect. Not scattered like a crash. Not burned. But placed. Abandoned. And nearby, evidence that suggested the pilot didn't die on impact. What investigators uncovered next didn't just reopen a cold case. It exposed a classified operation buried at the edge of modern warfare, where mistakes weren't corrected, they were erased. Tonight's story isn't about a plane crash. It's about a lie that survived a decade. A death that was officially closed, but never true. Before we begin, subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay with this story until the end. Because what happens next forces us to confront a chilling question. When the truth becomes inconvenient, how far will the system go to make it disappear? On August 14, 1998, Staff Sergeant Marcus Keaton, a 29-year-old Air Force pilot, lifted off from Nellis Air Force Base, Nevada, just after sunrise. According to the official flight log, it was a routine night training continuation mission, low risk, familiar terrain, standard procedures. Marcus had flown the route dozens of times. He radioed in once after takeoff. Confident. Normal. Then, at 6:41 a.m., his signal vanished. Radar showed his aircraft drifting briefly off course before disappearing entirely. No mayday. No emergency transmission. Within hours, the Air Force issued a statement: probable mechanical failure. Search teams were dispatched, but the effort was limited. After just 9 days, the mission was quietly scaled back. By the end of the month, Marcus was officially declared dead. His wife, Elena Keaton, was handed folded condolences and told the crash site was inaccessible. Classified airspace. Unrecoverable terrain. No remains to return. What no one explained was why satellite data later showed his aircraft never entered the crash zone listed in the report. Or why Marcus's final flight file was sealed. Or why his name disappeared from unit records within weeks. For the military, the case was closed. For Elena, it had just begun. For the first 48 hours after Marcus Keaton vanished, the military treated the situation like an emergency. Helicopters swept the Nevada desert. Ground crews searched canyons and dry lake beds. Radar technicians replayed flight data again and again, trying to pinpoint where his aircraft might have gone down. Then, suddenly, everything slowed. Search zones were narrowed instead of expanded. Civilian volunteers were turned away. Elena noticed that every update sounded less certain than the last, as if the answers were being rewritten in real time. 9 days after Marcus disappeared, the Air Force informed her the search was being suspended. The explanation was brief: no survivable crash indicators. But Elena knew something was wrong. Marcus's aircraft was equipped with an emergency locator transmitter, a device designed to activate automatically on impact. It never pinged. Officials claimed it must have failed. Then Elena received Marcus's personal effects. His wallet. His watch. His flight gloves. Items that should have been destroyed in a high-speed crash. When she asked where they were recovered from, she was told only, near the presumed site. No coordinates. No report. No photos. And when she requested his final flight data, her access was denied under a classification she'd never seen before. Whatever happened to Marcus Keaton? The truth wasn't lost. It was being withheld. Elena Keaton didn't stop asking questions. In 2001, 3 years after Marcus disappeared, she filed her first formal information request. What came back was a thin envelope stamped "released in part." Most of the pages were blacked out. Dates removed. Coordinates missing. Entire paragraphs erased with thick ink. But one detail slipped through, a maintenance log stamped "post-flight inspection." Elena froze. A post-flight inspection meant the aircraft had landed. When she confronted the base legal office, they claimed it was a clerical error. A typo. Nothing more. But the explanation didn't match the rest of the file. The timestamp on the log was 6 hours after Marcus vanished. Then came the call. An anonymous voice left a voicemail on Elena's answering machine late one night. "He didn't crash," the voice said. "And they know it." The message cut off abruptly. Weeks later, Elena's request privileges were revoked. Her correspondence went unanswered. And when she tried to visit Nellis to speak with Marcus's former squadron mates, she was told they had been reassigned. Every path led to silence. Someone had seen something. Someone had signed off on something they weren't supposed to. And whatever Marcus Keaton had flown into that morning in 1998, he was never meant to fly back out of it. In October 2008, nearly a decade after Marcus Keaton vanished, 2 hikers ignored a warning sign and stepped beyond the marked trail in a restricted section of northern Arizona. Less than half a mile in, they saw metal glinting through the trees. At first, they thought it was scrap. But as they pushed closer, the shape became unmistakable, an aircraft fuselage, partially buried, its paint stripped by sun and sand. No explosion marks. No scattered debris. Just a hard landing that never made the news. Authorities arrived within hours. The site was immediately sealed. Phones were confiscated. The hikers were told to sign non-disclosure agreements before they were allowed to leave. Stamped on the aircraft's frame was a serial number. It matched Marcus Keaton's jet. Investigators noted damage consistent with a controlled descent, not a catastrophic crash. Even more disturbing were signs that the canopy had been opened from the inside. Marcus hadn't died on impact. And just 50 yards away, beneath stacked stones and disturbed soil, search teams found evidence of a temporary shelter and blood traces that were at least 10 years old. The official story from 1998 collapsed in an instant. Marcus Keaton had survived. The real question was, who found him first? The closer investigators looked, the worse it became. Inside the wrecked aircraft, they found fingerprints preserved. Beneath layers of dust and oxidation, Marcus's fingerprints, on the canopy release lever and emergency controls. He hadn't just survived the landing. He'd worked to get out. Nearby, remnants of military-issued survival gear were scattered across the ground. A torn signal panel. A broken flare casing. A half-melted ration packet dated 1998. Marcus had been alive long enough to prepare for rescue. Medical analysts studying the blood evidence estimated he survived at least 24 to 48 hours after the crash. Long enough to move. Long enough to wait. Yet no rescue ever came. Even more troubling was what wasn't found. No emergency locator signal had ever been logged, not because it failed, but because the device had been manually disabled. The wiring was cut clean, with a tool, not damaged by impact. Someone had reached the site. And they knew exactly what to turn off. Elena was notified of the discovery under strict supervision. When she asked why no rescue had been launched after Marcus landed, officials offered no answer. Because the evidence now made one thing clear. Marcus Keaton didn't disappear in 1998. He was abandoned. As investigators reconstructed Marcus Keaton's final hours, a new contradiction surfaced. Radar data revealed a second aircraft in the area the morning Marcus disappeared. It flew without a transponder. Unlogged. Unidentified. Invisible to civilian systems, but unmistakable on military-grade radar playback recovered years later. The craft circled Marcus's last known position twice before vanishing from the screen. There was no record of this flight in official logs. When analysts compared timelines, the implications were chilling. The unidentified aircraft appeared after Marcus landed, not before. Its altitude and speed suggested observation, not rescue. Someone was watching. Maintenance records from Nellis later showed a single aircraft grounded for routine inspection the same day Marcus vanished. The tail number was partially redacted, but the type matched the mystery radar signature. Elena demanded answers. She was told the data was misinterpreted, that radar anomalies were common, that coincidences happened. But coincidences don't circle crash sites. And they don't disappear from logs. Marcus wasn't lost. He was located, and then deliberately ignored. And whoever made that decision ensured it would never appear on paper. Once the second aircraft was confirmed, a pattern began to emerge. Marcus Keaton wasn't the only pilot whose disappearance raised questions. Between 1996 and 1999, at least 5 other Air Force pilots were officially declared dead after training incidents across the western United States. Different bases. Different aircraft. Same result: sealed files, shortened searches, no recovered wreckage. Every case was tied to night operations. Low-altitude testing. Electronic warfare simulations. Experimental navigation systems. Buried inside one partially declassified memo was a phrase that kept resurfacing. Non-attribution required. Former defense analysts recognized it immediately. The wording was used for operations that could not be acknowledged, even internally. Missions designed to fail without consequences, because the consequences were never supposed to be documented. Marcus's flight fit perfectly. Unofficial route. Non-standard equipment, and an observer aircraft standing by, not to rescue, but to assess. Assess what? Performance, exposure, and survivability. Marcus wasn't just flying a jet that morning. He was part of a test where the outcome didn't matter, as long as no one could trace it back. And once he survived, the mission became a problem. The final piece came from a source no one expected. A retired Air Force search and rescue coordinator broke his silence after Marcus's case went public. He agreed to speak only off the record, his voice distorted, his name withheld. "We were told to stand down," he said. "Not because we couldn't reach him, because we weren't allowed to." According to him, a rescue window existed. A narrow one, but real. Weather conditions were flyable. Assets were available. Coordinates had been quietly confirmed. Marcus was alive. But the order came from above his command level. No explanation. No paperwork. Just a verbal directive: do not deploy. That kind of order wasn't meant to last more than a few hours. But hours became days. Days became silence. By the time anyone was permitted to recheck the area, the window had closed. The coordinator admitted something else, something that haunted him. Search and rescue teams are trained to log every denial, every aborted mission. But Marcus's case never appeared in their system. It had been erased before it could exist. Which meant the decision to leave him there wasn't improvised. It was planned. In early 2009, the Air Force quietly amended Marcus Keaton's service record. No press release. No notification to the public. Just a revised line under cause of death. Deceased during classified operational activity. It wasn't an explanation. It was a legal shield. Elena was summoned to a closed briefing room and warned that further inquiry could result in penalties under national security law. When she asked why Marcus had been left alive in the desert, The official across the table didn't answer directly. Instead, he said, the mission's parameters changed. That was the closest thing to an admission she would ever get. Independent analysts later uncovered a sealed budget line from 1998 tied to experimental aerial systems testing, funding that vanished the same week Marcus disappeared. No follow-up costs. No recovery expenses. No personnel compensation beyond survivor benefits. Because officially, nothing had gone wrong. Marcus's name never appeared in accident databases. His aircraft loss was never logged as a crash. And the observer aircraft from radar data? It was reassigned and scrubbed from records within months. Marcus Keaton wasn't killed by failure. He was written out to preserve success. And once the truth threatened to surface 10 years later, the system did what it always does best. It closed ranks. In the fall of 2010, Marcus Keaton was finally laid to rest. There was no public ceremony, no media, no official acknowledgement of what had really happened in the Arizona desert 10 years earlier. Just a quiet burial at a national cemetery, his name etched into stone beneath a date that still felt wrong. Elena stood alone as a folded flag was placed in her hands. No one mentioned the abandoned aircraft. No one mentioned the stand-down order. No one mentioned the hours Marcus spent waiting for help that never came. After the burial, the crash site was permanently sealed. The aircraft was removed under military escort and transferred to an undisclosed facility. Requests from historians and journalists were denied under national security exemptions. The files remain classified. But the evidence didn't disappear. It lives in radar data that was never meant to be seen, in redacted logs that don't line up, and in the simple fact that Marcus Keaton survived a crash he was officially declared dead in. He wasn't lost to the desert. He was sacrificed to silence. And even now, the question still lingers, not just about Marcus, but about every name erased the same way. How many were left behind and never found? For 10 years, Marcus Keaton's story was sealed behind classified files and official silence. Not because the truth was unclear, but because it was inconvenient. His death was accepted, documented, and closed while the evidence waited in the desert. Stories like this don't disappear. They're buried under paperwork, redactions, and warnings meant to scare people into moving on. But time has a way of uncovering what power tries to hide. If this case disturbed you, it should. Because Marcus wasn't the last pilot to fly a mission that didn't officially exist. And he won't be the last name quietly edited out of history. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Every week, we dig into cases that were ruled closed long before the truth was uncovered. Leave a comment below. Do you think Marcus was abandoned to protect a program, or to protect the people who approved it? Share this video with someone who still believes official reports always tell the full story. Because the truth doesn't vanish. It waits until someone is willing to ask the questions they hoped no one ever would.